and still watching your dreams crack and fall apart right in front of your eyes. That's exactly what happened to a young man who thought speed was everything. This is the story of how patience became his greatest weapon. There was this kid named Darren, early 20s, living in a quiet riverside town where pottery wasn't just a craft, it was a way of life. Every house had a kiln, and the smell of baked clay hung in the air like morning coffee. His old man was the best potter around, hands that could shape earth into art. Darren grew up watching those hands, learning the craft, but somewhere along the way, he got obsessed with one thing: being fast. He wanted to make 100 pots, sell them all, make a name for himself. Speed meant success, at least that's what he thought. So he spun that wheel like his life depended on it, cranking out pot after pot, barely giving the clay time to breathe. But here's the problem: the faster he went, the more things fell apart. Cracks appeared, handles snapped, colors came out uneven and ugly. One morning, frustrated and impatient, he told his father, "I can't sit around for days waiting for clay to dry. I'll miss my shot." His dad just looked at him with those calm, weathered eyes and said, "Clay only listens to time, son. You rush it, it breaks." Darren shot back, "Maybe that worked in your day, Pops, but people want things now. Fast." His father smiled that knowing smile and said, "Time hasn't changed, Darren." "We have." Darren didn't want to hear it. He turned back to his wheel, pressed harder, spun faster, determined to prove the old man wrong. By the end of that day, 4 brand new pots had shattered in the kiln. He just said, "Every craft has its rhythm. You can fight it, or you can learn it." Darren swept the shards aside and started over, but inside, something was eating at him. The next morning, the town crier made an announcement that changed everything. The annual Harvest Festival was coming, and with it, the biggest craft competition of the year. Winner gets a spot in the Grand Trade Market. Darren's eyes lit up like fireworks. "This is it," he thought. "I'll make 100 pots and blow everyone away." His father looked at him and said quietly, "Make 10 that last. The rest will follow." But Darren wasn't listening. He was already at the wheel, hands flying, clay spinning, ambition drowning out every bit of wisdom his father tried to offer. He worked all day and into the night, but impatience made him sloppy. He didn't check the moisture levels. He threw pots into the kiln before they were ready. By midnight, his shelves were stacked with what looked like perfect work, until the heat hit them. He just felt exhausted and empty. The next few days were brutal. Darren woke up before sunrise, worked past midnight, barely ate. He shaped dozens of pots, rushed the drying process, and stacked them by the kiln like he was running a factory. That night, he fired 20 pots at once. Standing next to the glowing orange kiln in the darkness, he imagined the prize money, the recognition, the validation. But when morning came and he opened that door, his stomach dropped. Most of the pots had cracked wide open. Some had exploded into pieces. His mother heard the crash and came running. Darren just stood there, speechless, staring at his shattered dreams. His father picked up one of the broken pieces, turned it over slowly in his hands and said, "This one needed more time. You didn't listen." Darren's voice cracked with frustration. "I worked harder than anyone. Why doesn't anything I do last?" His father looked him dead in the eye. "Because strength doesn't come from speed, son. It comes from patience." Darren couldn't take it anymore. He walked away, humiliated, angry at himself and everyone else. The whole village was whispering about his failure. He avoided the market square, couldn't stand the looks people gave him. A week later, something happened that changed him. He saw his father setting up a small table in the town square. On it were just 3 pots, simple, plain, but absolutely perfect. People stopped to admire them, running their fingers over the smooth surfaces. One woman asked, "How long does it take to make something this beautiful?" The old man smiled and said, "As long as it needs." Darren stood in the back of the crowd, watching. For the first time, he didn't feel jealous or competitive. He felt hollow. He realized his father didn't rush because he loved the craft itself, not just the applause that came after. That night, Darren went back to his workshop, broken pots everywhere. He sat down on the floor, surrounded by his failures, picked up a cracked piece, and whispered to himself, "I keep trying to win, but I never actually learn." He looked around at the clay, the wheel, the tools, and for the first time in months, he didn't move fast. He just sat there, thinking about everything his father had been trying to tell him. Then slowly, carefully, he started again. This time was different. He worked on one pot. Just one. He shaped it with care, set it on the drying shelf, and walked away. The next morning, he checked it, made tiny adjustments, and waited some more. Day after day, week after week, he repeated the same process. Shape, dry, wait, bake. Village kids would pass by his workshop and laugh. "One pot, Darren? At this rate, you'll be done next year." He just smiled and said, "Maybe, but it'll actually last." His hands moved slower now, but they were steadier, more intentional. He was finally learning what he'd been fighting against his whole life. Patience isn't weakness, it's control. It's power. By the end of the month, Darren only had a few pots finished, but they were the best work he'd ever done. Smooth, balanced, strong. When he tapped one with his knuckle, it rang out with a clean, clear sound. His father came by, touched the rim, and nodded with approval. "Now the clay listens to you," he said. Darren smiled faintly. "No, Pops, I finally learned to listen to it." The sound of Darren's wheel returned to the mornings, but slower this time, steady, almost meditative. The Harvest Festival was 1 week away. Posters went up all over town. Vendors started preparing their best work. The blacksmith polished iron gates. The weavers dyed new fabrics. Kids rehearsed songs for the parade. Darren nodded. "Yeah, but I'm only bringing what's actually ready." Every night he checked his small collection. No cracks, no chips. No signs of rushing. Each pot told a story of steady hands and long, quiet hours. On the morning of the festival, he loaded them carefully into a straw-lined cart and walked slowly toward the square. He wasn't expecting to win. He just wanted to show what he'd learned. The square was alive with color and music. Tables lined the streets, packed with handmade goods. When Darren rolled up, people turned and stared. He set up his table right next to his father's. Side by side, their stands looked simple but solid. When people picked up Darren's pots, they noticed something different. The weight, the balance, the smoothness. A merchant lifted one and said, "This feels real solid." Word spread fast through the crowd. When the judges walked by, they stopped at Darren's table. One of them, an older guy with glasses, ran his hand across the clay and said, "This is excellent work." "How long did this take you?" Darren answered honestly. "Longer than I wanted it to." The judge smiled. That's usually how the best things get made. At sunset, the mayor climbed onto the wooden stage and called for silence. "This year's award," he announced, "goes to the craftsman whose patience brought perfection to his work." He looked straight at Darren and his father. The crowd erupted in applause. Darren stood there, completely stunned. His father patted him on the shoulder and whispered, "You see? Time listens too when we learn to wait." It wasn't the prize that hit him in the chest. It was what it meant. He finally understood what his father had been teaching him all along. That night, walking home under the festival lanterns, Darren pushed his cart slowly along the dirt road. The sound of the pots inside was soft and steady. He looked at his dad and said, "I used to think patience was just sitting around doing nothing. Now I know it's doing the right thing long enough to see it grow." His father smiled. The festival ended. The music faded. The square emptied out. Life in the village went back to its quiet rhythm. But inside Darren's workshop, something permanent had changed. He no longer worked to impress anyone. He worked because he loved the calm that came with doing one thing right. Every morning, he shaped clay with steady hands. Every evening, he cleaned his tools and left the bench ready for tomorrow. People noticed the change. When their pots broke, they brought them to Darren. He fixed each one with care and a quiet smile. Old Mrs. Hayes said, "You've really grown up, son." He replied, "I just learned that rushing breaks more than clay." Even travelers started stopping by to watch him work. He didn't say much, but his hand said everything. One afternoon, a kid asked him, "Doesn't waiting get boring?" Darren smiled and said, "If I rush, I start over. If I wait, I finish." One evening, his father came to visit. He looked around the small workshop, saw the shelves lined with finished pots, each one smooth and strong, and smiled quietly. "You've built more than clay, son. You've built peace." Darren nodded, his voice gentle. "No, Pops. Patience built it for me. Here's the truth about patience. It's not about doing nothing. It's about working quietly while time does its part. Maybe you've been grinding, working, hoping, believing, and the results still haven't shown up. But sometimes life slows us down because what we're building needs more time to grow. Patience doesn't mean standing still. It means showing up every single day, even when nobody's watching. It means trusting that the effort you're putting in behind the scenes still counts. When Darren stopped chasing speed, he found peace. And in that peace, he found real strength. He learned that patience isn't weakness, it's control. Seeds don't bloom overnight. The strongest trees grow during quiet seasons when nobody's cheering. So if you're still waiting for your moment, don't quit now. Stay consistent. Keep your focus. Keep showing up. Because one day, all that quiet effort you've been putting in will rise. Not fast, but solid. Patience doesn't need to shout. It doesn't have to. When it's done, the results speak louder than anything else ever could.